Hello, I'm Danielle Yałowiecka with the BBC News. There have been further dramatic falls on stock markets in Europe and Asia after President Trump announced severe restrictions on travel between EU countries and the US to tackle the coronavirus. The markets in London, Paris and Frankfurt all plunged by more than 5% in the first few hours of trading. The European Union strongly criticised the travel ban. Catherine Stancheshin has the details.
They've released a statement, the EU Commission, a strong statement, saying that actually coronavirus is a global crisis, not limited to any continent. It requires cooperation rather than unilateral action. And the EU disapproves of the fact the US have taken this decision to impose a travel ban. It says the EU is taking strong action to limit the spread of the virus. And that's really a hit back at the fact that President Trump has suggested that European countries haven't been robust enough in their efforts to try and contain this spread.
Ireland, which is the only EU country exempt from the ban, has shut its schools for 2 weeks. China has said that the coronavirus epidemic within its borders has passed its peak. The whole country reported just 15 new cases on Thursday. The number of fresh infections in Wuhan, the city at the centre of the outbreak, fell to single figures for the first time since the crisis began. South Africa has reported the country's first case of local transmission. Our correspondent Anne Soy has more.
Even as the outbreak of COVID-19 is labelled a pandemic, it continues to grow at a slower pace in Africa. South Africa, Algeria and Nigeria now have evidence of local transmission. Some countries are taking drastic measures. Seychelles has temporarily closed down the island to cruise ships. And Uganda says passengers arriving at the international airport will be sprayed with a disinfectant.
The Olympic torch has been lit in Greece to mark the start of its journey to Tokyo, but in an almost empty arena. Only selected officials attended the event at the ancient stadium in Olympia, which was drastically pared back due to the coronavirus outbreak. Whilst spectators were banned, there was still song, dance and music. 26 members of an Iraqi militia group based in Syria are reported to have been killed in an overnight airstrike. Alan Johnston reports.
The airstrike on the Iraqi militia group came in the area of the Syrian border town of Abu Kamal. As yet, we don't know who launched the assault, but it came within hours of rocket fire on a base used by US troops in Iraq, just north of Baghdad. 2 Americans and a British soldier were killed. It's not clear who was behind this, but the Americans have blamed similar attacks in the past on their facilities in Iraq on local militiamen linked to Iran, and they've led to retaliatory US airstrikes.
World News from the BBC. 3 opposition politicians in Tanzania have been released from jail after supporters raised money to pay their fine. On Monday, a court found 9 politicians guilty of organising an illegal rally. At the event in 2018, a female student was killed when police fired shots to disperse the crowd. Germany's domestic intelligence service is putting part of the far-right Alternative for Germany party under surveillance, describing it as a threat to the democratic order. The move targets the Flügel group, an AfD faction especially strong in eastern Germany. The group has frequently been accused of inflammatory rhetoric against Muslims and immigrants. Its activities were already under scrutiny, along with those of the AfD's youth branch, due to suspicions of right-wing extremism. India's Supreme Court has upheld a lower court order directing the local government in Uttar Pradesh to remove public hoardings prominently identifying anti-government protesters. Sanjay Dasgupta reports.
When India's federal government amended the country's citizenship rules in a way that some felt discriminated against Muslims, vocal and sometimes violent protests broke out all across the country. Lucknow saw some of the most destructive demonstrations. This is what prompted the local government to put up massive billboards all over the city, prominently displaying the names, photographs and home addresses of those the government said had damaged public property. High Court judges said it was a gross violation of privacy. Now, the Supreme Court has refused to overturn that judgment pending a full hearing.
India's Road Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari has told Parliament he favours the introduction of pink buses for women in all cities across the country with a population of over 10 million. His comments come amidst growing concern over the safety of women, with several cities witnessing a significant rise in reports of sexual assaults. He said manufacturers had been instructed that new buses must have panic buttons. BBC News.